Hello, my name is Olof Skog. I am the European Union's ambassador to the UN here in New York. This is EU Talks. The goal of the UN is to improve the daily lives of citizens around the world. But the UN is a complicated place. In the EU Talks series, we will openly discuss the UN's work and how it delivers. Every month, EU Talks will engage with diplomats, UN officials, but also with experts, journalists, activists, creating what I hope will be a valuable space, especially for young people. Most people working in and around the UN represent a country or an organization. However, I believe that each of us also have a personal responsibility to find the solutions and to meet the expectations of people around the world. Along those lines, I will be asking some pretty hard questions to all of our guests. Welcome to EU Talks. Hello and welcome to EU Talks. Today we're going to discuss the situation in Ukraine. As we all know, the war started over 2 months ago, and the Russian aggression against Ukraine has led to tremendous suffering of the Ukrainian people. We know that millions have been forced to flee from their homes. Some of them are still on the run inside Ukraine. Others have made it across the border to other parts of Europe. But we also know that there are still pictures coming out from some terrible situations, Bucha, Mariupol, countries or cities that were not very well known to the world before the war started are now almost household names for everyone who follow the situation in Ukraine. Given the importance of this, we're going to divide this into 2 episodes. We'll have another episode focusing very much on the humanitarian work that the United Nations, UNICEF, is doing on the ground. We have today, joining me here at the EU delegation in the United Nations, 3 people who are very close to the situation. Alla Volska, who works in the Ukrainian delegation to the United Nations. You are from Ukraine and you have family still there. Yuliya Petsyk is with us. She studies at the Columbia University. You also have family back home in Ukraine. And you've been very active also doing what you can, but from the United States. And joining us from the UN system is Manuel Fontaine, who works with the UNICEF, the agency in the UN set to protect children across the world, and you've recently come back from a visit there. So maybe starting with you, Alla, can you tell us a little bit about the feelings you have, the sense of what you can do from where you sit at the United Nations in the Ukrainian delegation, but with still family back home?
Thank you, Ambassador, first of all, for having me here and for giving me the opportunity to speak first. I remember that night vividly when it all started. I mean, the imminent invasion was all over the news since late November, maybe, but it was repeated so many times that nothing happened that everybody already got relaxed and did not see that happening. And it was February 23rd here in New York. We had a debate on our long-standing agenda item in the United Nations regarding the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. And our foreign minister was here to speak at the debate. So we already had a very long day. We had to work late night the night before the debate. We were following the debate all day long to report back to the Capitol. And then when all of a sudden an Emergency Security Council meeting was scheduled for 9 p.m., we already felt like, oh no, another one. So we were getting ready for this final push to follow the Security Council debate and be done with the day. And just as it was 15 minutes through, probably, somebody posted in the group the urgent announcement that Putin was addressing the nation with urgent news. I immediately Googled to see what it was about, and that was when he announced a special military operation in Donbass. I immediately took to Twitter because that's where all the news are happening and in real time, and I already saw people posting small videos of missiles flying, of shots being fired. like I panicked at this very moment. I was like, this is not happening. This is not possible. And it felt so surreal because at this very moment, Security Council was happening. And everybody was speaking up, expressing their concerns over something that possibly might happen sometime, when at this very moment it was happening. Russian ambassador spoke probably 5 minutes before it started, saying that we're not going to invade. Stop being delusional. We have no such plans. We're just conducting military exercise on our own territory. That's when his president ordered a military operation in Ukraine. So I panicked, and I thought, should I call my family? Should I wake them up? Because in Ukraine it was almost 5 a.m. at the time.
Right.
Then I calmed myself down, and I figured that probably they're sound asleep, and maybe I should let them sleep until the morning comes so that I can deliver the news. So I sent a message, and it read basically, "Mom, the war has started. I hope that you're doing good, and please reply me back as soon as you wake up." And she called me back in an hour. Somebody was more impudent than me. Somebody actually called her saying that the war has started and there are shots being fired around Kiev and people need to evacuate. And let's just say that ever since then, we began working 24/7. I forgot what it is to smile. I feel like I cannot live a normal life when my people are being killed, massacred, even back home. Ever since then, it was about prioritizing your work through the lens, seeing whether it can make a difference on the ground or not. What I'm about to do today, is it gonna bring about change in Ukraine or not? Because I'm following a lot of issues within the UN, climate issues, health issues, economic issues, women's rights. They're all important, but when you have a war back in your country, when you have family to worry about 24/7, they're still in Ukraine, they're in a safe place now, so it's relatively easier to work. But some people might argue that living abroad, you don't feel as much as they do, and we're so lucky and privileged to be here. And to a certain degree, it's true. We don't have missiles flying over our heads. But on the other hand, it's even more difficult because you don't know what's going on. You are preoccupied 24/7. And because of time difference, when you finally get back home late night after a long day, and you can sleep, you cannot sleep because that's when your family wakes up, and that's when you can actually talk to them and make sure they're doing all right. So at the end of the day, it's about to do anything and everything possible that you can do from where you are. In my case, it might be negotiating resolutions, pushing decisions, collecting votes, but it might also be donating, protesting on Times Square, asking to close our sky, or sorting out humanitarian aid Sunday night. You name it. Like, I'm trying to make myself useful as much as I can. And of course, sometimes I feel like I feel defeated because when you push decisions, you're happy about it for like 15 minutes, and then you get the news that more people died, more shots were fired, more cities have been destroyed, and you feel like you're doing it in vain. But from the standpoint of international law, it is not in vain. We need to have these resolutions. We need to have these decisions.
Alla, thanks very much for talking to us about your personal commitment and how you've tried to find a way of working really, really hard, trying to make a difference, but with the frustration and uncertainty by having your family there, but also this very strong, I think, powerful message for many Ukrainians who are not able to be in Ukraine right now, that there's always something you can do from wherever you are, you know, and taking a stand and standing up for something, and that is in itself very important. Yuliya, do you have a similar experience as Alla? Because you're far away, but you're at the University of Columbia here. But I don't think you're alone in your activism, right? So you want to say a few words about what you feel, how you feel about this, and what you feel that people like you can do?
Yes, it's already been 2 months, so in some way it almost feels like the big crowd that was cheering for Ukraine has sort of dissipated and moved on to other agendas and issues, especially because in the US there are a lot of domestic issues that preoccupy people. So right now it feels a little bit, I feel like people that are actually dedicated are left with the cause. In the first days, of course, people were gathering, and it was really wonderful to see how student body was organizing around showing support to Ukraine, showing up to Times Square, showing up to Washington Square, reaching out, how can we help, people from all over the world reaching out somehow to me. I don't even know where they're from, how they have my number, asking how they can help, where they can donate, have different ideas of how they can support students, student organizations, grassroots movements here in the US or in Ukraine. So it was just wonderful to see, but also a little bit overwhelming, because at the same time you're dealing with personal trauma and so much worry about what's happening at home, what's happening with my friends, what's happening with my extended family, trying to make sure that everybody's okay, trying to evacuate some people or find, you know, temporary housing in other parts of Ukraine or in other parts of Europe. So it's definitely very overwhelming, and I feel like it completely disrupted my life. And even now, life is before and after. You don't think of it as something continuous. It was completely disrupted. And up to this day, it doesn't quite feel normal. And I remember, especially in the first months, you go out on the street and it feels so odd that people are just living their lives, because for you, life has changed so much, and you almost like, how can you eat at a restaurant? How can you read a book? You know, it just feels like nothing is important anymore. And I was almost like about to scream on the street, like, people, do you understand what is happening? And I think now, of course, as I kind of work through it and calm myself a little bit, I think I can understand people that continue living their lives unbothered. And yet, I think right now with the student organizations, we have a Ukrainian club active on campus. We have around maybe 16 students that are from Ukraine or have a family in Ukraine. So we've been meeting with each other almost weekly and kind of catching up on the news and trying to support each other, but also figuring out ways how we can provide support to our country long term, not just through grassroots movements that are quite spontaneous, but also how can we make sure that financial support continues, how can we make sure that humanitarian aid continues. So it's been quite difficult, and obviously, you know, when Russian troops withdrew from Kiev region, we all kind of breathed out in relief. But then 2 days later, the news about Bucha started unsurfacing, and realizing that, oh, this is area where my grandmother lived up until pretty recently, and this is where I could have lived, and could be my story. I think that was something very scary and something very dark. And I think prior to Bucha news, we were sort of running on adrenaline, and I had so much energy, you know, I couldn't sleep, so you kind of had to put it into either your writing or your protesting or your fundraising or your organizing events. And I think after Bucha, it was just almost such a traumatic experience of seeing people that, you know, I could have lived with dead in mass graves. That was something very dark. And I think we're all still grieving, and I don't think we even started unpacking the trauma of Mariupol and what actually happened there. And I think after we win this war, which hopefully will happen soon, there's going to be a lot of grieving and recovery that we as a nation will have to go through.
Thank you for being with us today. This was the first part on our focus on Ukraine, listening to two very powerful testimonies from Yuliya and from Alla about living in the United States, being committed, and having family still left in Ukraine.